A different Matthew has a totally different question. Now, obviously,
Okay.
people don't know what I'm talking about when I say different Matthew, but we just had a question from a Matthew. Here's a different Matthew now. And he wants to know this. How do we talk about the reality of spiritual warfare to rationalist Christians? Now, the context that he's speaking in here is that he's the leader of a church which affirms LGBTQ people as Christians, and both in ministry and in marriage. And now this decision has caused all sorts of problems, and but the church has sort of been thriving. But what is strange to him is that the same church has a hard time accepting the teaching that there is a Satan figure and that there are evil spirits. And so he's talked about how other nations believe, and that there's the biblical witness that affirms the reality of evil spirits. But these lovely people just simply flat out reject the existence of anything outside of scientific evidence when it comes to this question. What do you think? Is it hopeless, or is there any other ideas that we can try here?
Well, I don't know, Matthew. You know, if folks will only believe what science tells them they can believe, I wonder how these people believe in God. I mean, to believe in God is to believe in a transcendent spiritual agent that can't be measured scientifically. So if folks are already willing to make the leap to say that there's a good spirit being, a perfect spirit being out there that is beyond the physical world, why is it so impossible to say that there may be other spiritual agents that are not good, that have gone evil? With human beings, we find that some are good and some are evil. In fact, we find that everywhere. Why think that can't be true in the spiritual realm? But more concretely, the question kind of reminds me of C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, he points out, he's talking about animal suffering, and in particular, animal suffering throughout evolution. And since that can't be blamed on any humans, he pins it on Satan. He says Satan's been corrupting the evolutionary process. And then he notes, he goes, now among the things that we know to be true, Satan's non-existence is not one of them. You can't know that he doesn't exist. They're just assuming that. And he called that, how do you refer to that? His disbelief in Satan is nothing more than the fad of the current times, or the fad of current opinion, or something like that. It's just not fashionable right now to believe in Satan and spiritual beings among intellectuals in the West. And that's the only argument really that folks offer for it. It might help a little bit is if you can point out that when you talk about Satan or the powers, to get rid of all the caricatures of them, like Satan with the pointed ears and pitchfork or whatever, that's what pops into a lot of people's minds when they think of Satan or demons and stuff. And since that obviously is a mythic sort of expression, they assume the whole thing is myth. If you can talk about how whatever picture you have of Satan, that's just a pointer. It points towards a transcendent reality. You can even call them symbols of a transcendent reality. But there is a transcendent evil reality, an evil that transcends us. That's the point of his talk. And that, I think, is a reality. The other thing I'd say is that if these folks believe in Jesus, to point out that Jesus taught these things, and he'd be clear to believe in Satan as a personal agent and demons. He cast a lot of demons out and all the rest. And so if you confess that he is the Son of God and the revelation of God, well, to disagree with him on this point is a pretty big deal. Jesus said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do the things that I teach? We could also say, why do you call him Lord, 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 and don't believe the things that he teaches? Because he teaches on this. And so I think that the other thing I would maybe point out is that is it Matthew? He may have already touched on this, but what was I going to say? That conviction, that rationalistic conviction that spirit agents aren't real, is a very Euro-white centric perspective. Most people throughout history have not believed that. It's only the post-Enlightenment white Western culture, and even in our culture, it's really only the academics who believe it. So it's a small cauldron of people, the academics, intellectuals, who decided that what everyone else is seeing in the spiritual realm is invalid. Our perspective that they don't exist is the true one. And you could accuse that of being a sort of Eurocentric perspective. in the wake of postmodernism, there's a lot of folks that have been saying this and saying we have no reason to privilege our Western secular worldview on other people, or to say that ours is more valid than others. This is sort of the relativization of postmodernism. And in light of that, a lot of academics, not a lot, but some academics, especially in ethnic studies and transcultural studies, have said that you've got to go native. To understand another culture, you've got to immerse yourself into it, and as much as possible, try to lose your own, put aside your own worldview and try to adopt theirs. And interestingly enough, when they do that, there's been a number of really surprising testimonies that have come out of that, of people experiencing the reality of the demonic realm or of the angelic realm as they've entered into worldviews that allow for that. Our worldviews open us up to or close us off to aspects of reality. And the secular worldview closes us off to the reality of these spiritual realms. So if you can suspend that and go native and think in terms of non-Western people, get on their perspective, you might discover that there's a reality to the things that they're talking about. Things along those lines. And then always personal testimony that I tell people, field experiences I've had, and where there's been supernatural stuff manifesting in deliverance sessions or whatever. And at some point, the psychosomatic explanation runs thin. Like, oh, well, the mind is capable of all sorts of weird feats. When you've seen one of a girl's eyes rotate counterclockwise 3 times while the other eye stares at you, well, no psychosomatic explanation is going to work for that one. I'm going with the demon explanation.
That's good. I think the only thing I would add to that for me is that, especially if you've already gotten to the point where you've accepted the idea of God, there's all sorts of questions that come up if you don't include spiritual agents. And like, for instance, whatever God you believe in is going to be constrained as soon as you start talking about natural evil. You can't say that this God who created this universe is perfectly holy if his creation is full of all sorts of unholiness. And so how do you account for all of the unholiness in this God's creation? And I don't think it's a coincidence that Jesus kind of endorses this very strange belief in this nemesis to God. And it just so happens to solve that problem, which is a very fundamental central problem to belief in God, I think.
I totally agree with you. I think natural evil, one of the big advantages of holding to what I've called a conflict worldview or a warfare worldview is that it offers an explanation for something fundamentally askew in the natural order of things, because it does not reflect the perfect character of God. I'm glad you brought that up.